Okay, go. Maybe a first question about science fiction and fantasy. What do you like in this genre?
Okay, what I absolutely best like is books about aliens and space stations and spaceships.
Yes.
Things like C.J. Cherry.
Oh.
That's what all like Vernor Vinge, Fire Upon the Deep.
Okay.
Something like that. That's my very favourite kind of subgenre of SF.
Okay.
But I also read very widely. There's a whole lot of things that I like. And what I enjoy most of all is something that really makes me think and really makes me excited. And there's not as much of that around as there was when I was 15, because I've thought most of the thoughts at this point, but still sometimes there will be things that will really blow me away and make me excited.
Okay. In French we have an expression. We said soon of science fiction for the fan, for example. Do you think you are sons of science fiction?
What does it mean?
Fils de science-fiction.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yes. I guess. Yes. Yes. I probably am. Yeah.
Morwina, is it about science fiction and your love on science fiction?
So, it is about a girl who loves science fiction, and she has fantasy problems, and so she lives in a world that is like this world, but she has fantasy problems, and she has real world problems, and she has fantasy problems. But science fiction is not the problem. Science fiction is the answer, or science fiction is giving her tools to deal with the world. So yes, it's about growing up, and it's about reading science fiction and loving science fiction, and yes, it's about my love of science fiction. And I always say when I talk about that book that it is semi-autobiographical, and I say the books are real, the books are real. There's a lot of things in that book that I made up, but I didn't make up the books are real, and the books are great, and the reaction that she has to the books and the way the books help her and help her cope in her world. It's not that it's escapism. It's not that they give her an escape. It's that they give her a toolkit for dealing with the world that she needs to deal with. So when she reads a book, and she learns from that book different things, and she learns things that are useful to her in dealing with other things, with the world.
Okay. How do you see Morwina? What kind of girl she is for you?
Okay, yeah.
Not for the reader.
No,
for you.
in many ways, she's me when I was 15.
Yeah.
Okay. For me, that's really I was channeling my own 15-year-old self. So she's overconfident in some areas. She thinks that she knows more than she does in some ways. She's very confident in other areas. She's very unconfident, and she knows nothing. And it surprises me when readers say to me, and readers say this to me a lot, they say, oh, I really empathized with her, I really liked her, I really wanted to be her friend. And I want to say to them, well, where were you when I was 15? Because nobody liked me when I was 15. Nobody liked me. Nobody wanted to be my friend. And that's true. She's lonely. She's isolated. She's cut off in a lot of different ways. The original title, among others, she's away from her family and her cultural context, and she's in a boarding school in England, and she doesn't fit in, and the girls don't like her, and she doesn't get on with them. But she quotes Tiberius, or at least she quotes Robert Graves' Tiberius from I, Claudius. Let them hate me as long as they fear me. And she doesn't try to be nice to them necessarily.
Yes.
You know, she doesn't want them. And she is very much like the way that I was. I mean, I was awful in some ways, and arrogant, and intellectually arrogant. And she's certainly all of those things. But she is also lonely, and she loves books. And because you're inside her head, which is where the difference is, because reading the book, you're inside her head, it's her diary. Whereas people would see me and they were outside my head, and I would not seem so endearing to them, because I had no idea how to be friendly, so I didn't have friends. And I think there's some of that visible in her when she gets to the book club, which is one of the most made-up things in the book. All of the good things in the book, apart from the books, are made up. So if the book club represents anything, it's a situation where I got into fandom and met people to talk to books, which didn't happen until I was grown up, until I was 22. I didn't meet anybody like that. But when she gets to the book club, she doesn't really know how to talk to those people. She talks too much, and she's over-enthusiastic because finally there's somebody to talk to, and she lets it go and talks too much and gets like that. And I'm still like that. I still talk too much.
No. We understand you love books, of course, on science fictions, but writing. When do you begin to write? It was an evidence to you to.
So in some ways I've always been writing. I've been writing since I was a kid. And certainly when I was a teenager, when I was more Wenna's age, I was writing seriously. I didn't really have the magic, but what I had was writing, and that was my thing that I did. And when I look at my real notebooks from when I was 15, sort of like more than half of it is attempts at stories. So, not really journaling so much as writing stories then. Of course it was all longhand then, and then typewriter. We're talking a long time ago. It was the early 80s. And then I met my first husband, and I showed him my writing, and he said that it wasn't any good. And I've got to say, it wasn't any good. Objectively, it wasn't good. And so I stopped writing, and I didn't write for quite a long time. And then in 1994, I got online, and I met people who wanted to talk about books on Usenet. Usenet was so great. On Records SF Written, and I met people who wanted to talk about books and about writing, and I started to write again and to take writing seriously. And in that time of not writing, I'd gone from being pretty bad to being nearly good enough.
Yeah.
And I wrote a novel then, which is called The Rebirth of Palm, and I sent that to Patrick Nielsen Hayden at Tor, and he replied to it saying that it's nearly good enough, and it's the kind of book that people who are going to write really good books later write, and I shouldn't try to fix it, I should write something else and then send it to him. And he'd taken so long to read it and get back to me that I had written something else in between. I'd written The King's Peace. So I sent him The King's Peace. And I replied to this email and I said, I've written another book, it's different. I think I've fixed the problem of the book not having any middle. Can I email it to you instead of printing it out and sending it across the Atlantic, because I was still in Britain?
Yeah.
And he said yes, and this is how I acquired my superstition that when you print things out, it's bad luck and nobody ever buys it. So I never print anything out. Printing things out is bad luck. I do all my submissions electronically. And usually the first time I see a book of mine printed out is when I get the copy edit back. I never print it out myself. So he bought that then, and that was published in 2000. And I have published 10 novels and a collection of blog posts and 3 poetry collections since then. And I've got two more novels and another collection of blog posts coming out next year.
Hey, great.
Yeah.
And why science fiction in your writing? Why do you like science fiction?
Oh, I can't possibly answer why I like it, but I think I like it because it has wider answers, because you've got more possibilities for the answers that you can have. So a story asks questions about what's going on, and you can have very interesting questions, and then you can give them very boring answers. And I mean, it's like if you read Homer, the question of why any character did anything is often answered by because the gods made them. And that's a very dull answer. So the really interesting characters in Homer are the gods, because they've actually got motivation in a human way, in a realistic way. They do things for their own reasons. They've got reasons. Whereas the human characters are often very pushed around by the gods. And Achilles is very interesting because he doesn't allow himself to be pushed around so much. But you've got one answer. Why did they do it? The gods made them. And similarly, when you're reading mimetic fiction, very often what you've got in terms of why did people do things, why did these things happen that set it up, you've got very boring answers. You know, they did it because they were in love with somebody, they did it because they were afraid of losing their job, and whatever it was that they did, even if what they did was interesting, the answer, the space the answer can be in is very boring. And when you are writing, or you're reading within the fantastic, within fantastica, science fiction and fantasy, you've just got a whole range more answers. So if you've got one of those stories about a university professor who commits adultery, and the answer to why he did it is the gods made him, that's actually interesting, okay, at this point.
Okay.
That's interesting. That's an interesting answer to that question, because it depends on the question. But it's just, there's more space for doing things. You can do more interesting things when you are writing in genre. And I do not get ideas for stories that are just mimetic this world stories. And my novel, My Real Children, which came out this year, is about a woman who is 90 and she has dementia, and she remembers two different versions of her own life. So she's in a nursing home with Alzheimer's. She's remembering completely different things that cannot both be true. And like, did I have 4 children or 3 children? When this guy asked me to marry him, did I say yes or no? Was Kennedy assassinated by a bomb? Or did he resign after the Cuban Missile Exchange took out Miami and Kiev? They can't both be true, and she knows they can't both be true, but she is very confused. And it's a story, 2 stories. It's a story of a woman's life in the second half of the 20th century. And in many ways, it's like a mimetic story, okay? Nothing exciting happens to her. She gets married and has children, or she falls in love with a different person, and she has a relationship that's like a marriage with a woman, and they have children. But it's not big, exciting, dramatic events. She doesn't change the world. But because I've got both stories and they're in tension with each other, and because it's alternate history, so the worlds are diverging, it's just in a more interesting answer space for what's going on there, and that's the closest I've come to writing a straight up mimetic novel.
Okay.
Most of my books are very much not like that, and Morwenna, among others, is actually unusual in terms of how little magic it's got. And some people have said I could have written it without the magic. I could not have written it without the magic. The magic is what makes that story go. Yeah. The magic is all through it. And her attitude to magic and the way that she connects to the fairies and she connects to the world, and the problems she has because of that, it's just everything all the way through is affected by that.
Okay, the big questions. Your 5 favorite books?
Well, I don't have 5 favorite books. I've got thousands of favorite books. But if I have to give 5, it's going to be Lord of the Rings, Sighting by C.J. Cherryh, which is a book I've read over and over and over and over again. The whole Vorkosigan saga by Bujold, which is not one book, that's like, I don't know how many books it is at this point, like 8 or something. But seen as one thing, that's one of my favourite things. Rosemary Kirstein's Steerswoman books, again, that's 4 books, but seen as one thing. Those are absolutely wonderful. If you're not familiar with those, I don't think they've been translated, but they seem like they're fantasy. And it's a low-tech world, and there is a woman who is a steerswoman, and she travels making maps, and there are mentions of wizards and demons and things like this. But it turns out that it is science fiction, and it is on a planet that is being terraformed. And the wizards are people who've kept more technology and that they're not allowing to the ordinary people, and there are things going on. And really, what those books are about is the scientific method. They're about the process of how you go about doing science and discovering the world, and they're just great. I love those. The Steerswoman's Road, The Lost Steersman, and The Language of Power. And she's working on another one which is going to be called The City in the Crags. And I can't wait, I'm really waiting for that very anxiously. And my 5th thing, again, not one book, but I was talking about how I don't get so excited about books anymore, because generally when I read something, I think, oh, that was a really nice one of those. You know, I really enjoyed that, but I don't get excited in that same kind of way when something blows my head off. But this is a recent thing that really did blow my head off, and it's not out yet.
Yes.
Okay, but Ada Palmer, who is a composer and a historian as well as being a science fiction writer. She's just amazing. She's a Renaissance woman. She studies the Renaissance, and she is a Renaissance woman. And she has a series coming out from Tor. And the first book is called Dogs of Peace. And it's going to be a 4-book series. And she's written the first 3, and I've read them, and they are just so great. They make me excited about science fiction in the way that I was excited about it when I was a teenager. I just love them. And there's so many things about them that are so interesting. There's so many different things. The world is great, and the characters are great. And the details of the world are so fascinating, and I just can't wait for them to be out so that I can talk to other people about them. It's very exciting when I can talk to her about them, or I can talk to other people who have read them, because they're just really, really great. So I would say, even though the 4th one isn't written yet, but the first 3 of those have sort of got to go in my top 5. And now I'm thinking, all these things I haven't said, you know, I haven't said Samuel Delaney, and how can I not have said Ursula Le Guin? How can I not have said Verna Vinci? You know, there's so many things that are competing to be in my top 5. I don't have 5. I couldn't have 5. And there's so many people who are alive now and are doing great work now, and that are exciting. Carl Schrader, a Canadian writer, he's doing very exciting stuff, very different kinds of things, you know, and there's people who are just doing really great things now, and that's very, very exciting. It's great. I love living in the future. You know? I know I've been talking to people about Morwenna this weekend, and they've been saying how they identify with the character, but they were never quite that isolated because of the internet. And I say, yes, isn't the internet great? Isn't it marvellous? You know, talk about a glory of civilization, and it allows so much creativity and so much friendship and connection that we just couldn't have. So nobody is as isolated now as I was when I was 15, and as Morwenna is in that book, because the internet lets us connect in this great way where we can find other people.
Great. Thank you very much Okay, the last questions. You believe in fairy?